It all starts on a bustling street where people are enjoying the Christmas spirit. The atmosphere was one of pure joy, with laughter echoing all around. Amidst it all, a family walks together celebrating the wonderful day they've had. The couple's little girl soon gets distracted when she sees a huge person in front of her. She gazes in awe, staring at that person. And that person was our MC, who was frustrated, wondering why he always has to shrink down to let others pass. He reflects that it was to be expected that he be the only lonely person in the middle of that crowd. He then walks listlessly toward the subway. However, he suddenly stops, and immediately something catches his eye. It turns out there's another person completely alone, just like him. It's a Santa Claus who seems to be in a pretty miserable situation. A sign asks people to tell their wishes to the good old man, something the MC would normally ignore. But since it's Christmas Eve, the day his parents passed away and left him all alone, he decides to help the poor man. Fumbling in his wallet, he pulls out a bill. And along with the money, he decides to give the old guy something to eat. He then places the onigiri and the money on top of the sign. Suddenly, Santa grabs his hand tightly, praising his kindness. The old man claims he wants to return the favor and insists on hearing the young man's wish. Thinking the man is crazy, the MC tries to pull away as quickly as possible, but the grip only gets tighter, preventing any movement. The young man is shocked to realize he's being physically overpowered and can't move an inch. With his eyes shining brightly, Santa begs for the wish, as he can't go back to his village without it. Tired of struggling, the young man sighs and asks if he'll be let go if he says what he wants. The old man agrees on the spot, clearing the way for the confession. Trying to get it over with quickly, the MC asks to win the lottery, but the man senses it's not a sincere wish. Staring at this bizarre fellow, he understands he needs to tell the truth. Deep down in his soul, all he really needed was a family that would never leave him. So he reveals his wish to have a wife as cute as a bunny and a daughter as adorable as a mongoose. Sensing the scent of a genuine wish, Santa Claus notices the deep loneliness the young man has lived with for so long. The old man celebrates his great luck in finding a soul so similar to his own. With a frightening face, he promises to find the perfect wife and the most respectful daughter for the young man. In a bizarre gesture, Santa Claus kisses the MC's hand, wishing him a very happy life. Startled, the young man yanks his hand back, calling the man a lunatic, and runs away from there. As he flees in disgust, the old man shouts that all the Santas will use their powers to grant that wish. A while later, the MC is already in the subway car heading home. He stares at his own hand, still disturbed by the bizarre interaction he just had. His thoughts revolve around all that nonsense the old man spouted. Even though he thinks the guy was crazy, he reflects on why he revealed his greatest dream. Looking at a poster with a happy family, he admits to himself that he just wanted to be happy too. Overcome by exhaustion, he ends up closing his eyes and falling asleep right there. The young man suddenly awakens, bothered by a strange smell and a freezing cold. Getting up slowly, he scratches his head, feeling a certain discomfort. But as soon as he opens his eyes, confusion takes over his face. He realizes he is now trapped in a wooden cage, being pulled by a cart in a medieval setting. In nothing but his underwear inside the cell, the young man panics, trying to understand where he's ended up. Next to him, a bearded man with a rustic appearance just observes this scene. Another prisoner, blonde and covered in scars, also shares the confined space. Observing all the other prisoners around, the MC deduces that this looks a lot like the Middle Ages. Curious, he turns his head to check the outside of the cart. Soldiers in armor walk alongside the cell, talking in a completely unknown language. Combining the period film setting with the strange language and different people, the situation becomes clear. Unsure if he's in a very realistic dream or reality itself, he comes to an absurd conclusion. In some crazy way, he ended up being transported to a completely different world. Trying to process all this, he curls up on the floor, hugging his bare legs while breathing heavily. Then, he notices a prisoner slumped in a corner and wonders if the poor guy has already passed on. Cautiously, the MC touches the man's shoulder, apologizing for the intrusion. The man's body simply slumps to the side without any reaction. Completely exhausted and sprawled on the floor, the young man recalls Santa's crazy promise about granting his wish. Staring at the dirty ceiling, he wonders if he misunderstood the word happiness his whole life to have ended up in this misery. Time passed without him having any idea how many days he'd been trapped in this nightmare. The cart continued its endless journey through dense forests. During this miserable period, he managed to find out that everyone in there were slaves. Sighing with exhaustion, he also understood the second point of that torturous journey. The soldiers' objective was to drag the group along until they found buyers interested in the human merchandise. The sound of the lock being opened finally brings some news. The prisoners are lined up outside, while a village chief chooses the ones in the best condition. The MC admits that his pride was wounded by becoming a slave, but that also brought a glimmer of hope. Confident in his decent physique, he believed he would be bought quickly and get out of that heckish cart. That optimistic thought was the first positive thing he'd felt since arriving in this world. But the harsh reality hit hard, leaving the young man with an empty gaze after being rejected in several villages in a row. Dust kicks up as the cart leaves yet another village behind without any successful sales. The depressing journey continues down another dirt road under the hot sun. Thrown onto the constantly swaying wooden floor, he can barely understand how his life reached this point. Remembering his mother's advice to always live to the fullest, Tawan wonders if there's any point in staying alive. Just then, a childhood memory invades his mind, bringing back old demands and unrealistic pressures. Squeezing his eyes shut, Juwan wonders if he can really endure this whole ridiculous ordeal. The image of the insane Santa Claus promising to use all his power comes back to haunt him on that cold floor. Reaching his limit, the MC curses this so-called happiness and tells both worlds to go straight to heck. Clenching his fist with extreme anger, he finally understands what needs to be done at that moment. Overcome by despair, the young man decides that his only salvation is to pass on to escape so much pain and suffering. But soon reason speaks louder again, completely erasing that self-destructive thought. The true desire to have a precious family screams from the depths of his soul, giving him a new reason to fight. Utterly drained, he finally finds a drop of peace amidst that psychological torment. Suddenly, a piece of fresh bread is offered through the bars of his wooden prison. A kind woman appears in front of the cell, distributing food to the miserable slaves. Handing the meal directly to the MC, she shows a rare compassion for this place. Hiding behind the woman's skirt, an adorable little girl peeks at the prisoner with great curiosity. Staring at the sunlit pair, the young man is in shock at the unexpected scene. The story then cuts to a rustic and isolated cabin in the middle of a vast forest. Inside the house, the woman and the little girl are sitting at the table in a very quiet and calm atmosphere. The child eats her meal slowly, holding the wooden bowl with her two small hands. Worried, the woman pushes her own plate toward the girl and asks her to eat much more. Hesitant, the little one refuses the offer, stating that the older woman must be hungry too. In a caring tone, the woman explains that's precisely why she wants to see the child very well fed. The little girl insists on refusing, showing immense empathy for their difficult situation. Moved by the pure gesture, the woman takes her plate back in complete silence. She agrees that they should both share the meal and face the challenges side by side. The moment of peace is broken by loud knocks on the door, announcing the arrival of the village chief. Hugging the girl protectively, the woman hears the order that she will receive one of the slaves as her new husband. Completely shocked, she is told to prepare herself and return to the mountains with the man the next day. As soon as the chief leaves, tension fills the house as the hug becomes even tighter and more fearful. Desperate and trembling in the dark, she panics, fearing she'll suffer physical abuse again. Even terrified of the dark future, the woman recognizes that escape is an impossible alternative. Watching the child sleep in her lap, she decides she can't abandon that little soul no matter what. The woman reaffirms her courageous decision, refusing the idea of letting the girl face loneliness once more. Then, the memory of the girl's suffering cries comes back to squeeze her heart with great force. The pain etched on the little one's face was clear proof of all the abandonment she had already faced. Left alone on that cold floor, the little girl wailed in pure despair, looking for comfort. Watching the scene from a distance, the woman also felt completely lost about her own grim fate. Huddled in a corner of the house, her greatest fear was having to relive the nightmare of her tragic past. Snapping out of the bad memories, she focuses her gaze on the calmness of the sleeping little one right in front of her. Analyzing the girl's fragile sleep, she understands that the trauma and fear are exactly the same for both of them. This is just a nameless 5-year-old child who lost her father in a terrible way. Embittered, the woman recalls the fateful day her own father sold her for a single rabbit pelt. On her very first day in the cabin, she was beaten by the man who was to be her husband before she even settled in. The reason for the cowardly assaults was a futile excuse about being late for their arranged arrival time. That violent punishment served as the crushing warning that her miserable life was just beginning. Left on the cold wooden floor, she felt the weight of absolute despair crush her soul completely. In that moment of pure agony, the little girl approaches the fallen woman with very hesitant steps. Completely bruised and exhausted, the woman lifts her eyes toward the fragile child. The little one showed an immense purity that contrasted sharply with that true nightmare. Bending down very carefully, the girl tries to offer some comfort in the midst of the deep darkness. That angel-like child was the only soul in years to approach her with genuine kindness. After her husband disappeared in the mountains, the two of them ended up alone in the isolated cabin. The man's fate was tragic, as he was supposedly devoured by wolves during one of his routine hunts. The news of his passing brought immense relief, but it also carried a great despair for their future survival. Without a guaranteed provider, reshaped the woman's face in an overwhelming and silent way. In that cruel village, a woman without a husband was completely vulnerable and at the mercy of her own luck. Returning to the present moment, the pair walks hand in hand through the village gates under the bright sun. Excited by the sudden commotion, the little girl points in surprise at something eye-catching in the middle of the street. Fascinated, she points out the huge wooden cage full of prisoners parked in the center of the area. The woman follows the direction of the child's finger, staring at the sad reality of those caged slaves. Moved by a feeling of pity, both of them slowly approach the makeshift structure. Inside the cramped cell, Juwon reacts in shock upon noticing the approach of this unexpected pair. The young man's eyes widen, completely paralyzed by the surprising sight he just witnessed. In that instant, dark memories from his own world invade his mind with extremely harsh insults. The old humiliations echo mercilessly, shattering what little self-esteem he had left. The ghost of daily rejections makes the prisoner shrink under the weight of his own insignificance. But the terrible hallucination is soon cut short by the focused and compassionate gaze of the woman right in front of him. The image of that welcoming woman reflects in the MC's tired eyes, bringing a comforting warmth. Without any prejudice or disgust, the young woman offers some warm loaves of bread through the thick iron bars. The silent and noble gesture from the two of them radiated a sense of peace he had never experienced before. The delivery of the food crosses the barrier of the dirty prison, symbolizing a drop of hope in that brutal setting. At a loss for words, Juwon just stares at his benefactors, absorbing the pure kindness of that brief encounter. The peaceful interaction is interrupted by the arrival of some villagers, drawing the small group's attention. The leader orders the woman to return home immediately, taking over the reception of the newly arrived soldiers. Obedient to the local order, she calls the little girl and starts walking back to the safety of her cabin. As she slowly walks away, the little one turns her head back for one last curious look at the prisoner. Holding the food firmly, the young man watches them leave, immersed in absolute silence. Juwon devours the bread hungrily inside the cramped cage. Just then, the soldiers grab the young man and drag him out of the cage unceremoniously. Being thrown violently onto the grass, his stomach still rumbles, demanding more food. Lying on the grass, the MC takes a deep breath, trying to endure the intense humiliation. The guards gather in front of him as the village chief announces the start of the procedure in the local language. Suddenly, one of the soldiers grabs the young man's hand and makes a deep cut in it with a dagger. Soon, the prisoner's blood begins to drip directly onto a strange leather document. Glowing with an intense blue light, the scroll's magic leaves Juwon completely startled. Sighing with exhaustion, he wonders what kind of crazy, spell-filled world this is. Finishing the ritual, the troops hand the magical contract directly to one of the village leaders. With the deal sealed, the men in armor turn their backs and leave, leaving the young man kneeling. Completely lost, he raises his head, awaiting his next and dreaded fate. The surrounding scenery reveals a calm and peaceful village encircled by a vibrant forest. As temporary aid, a large sack full of supplies is dropped on the dirt ground. One of the elder women informs the kind lady that the new husband doesn't understand the language and that she must collect on this debt in the future. The old woman confesses that the village hated her former husband and only tolerated him for his work in the mountains. She tries to reassure the young woman, guaranteeing that this new companion should have a very different demeanor. Staring at the silent woman, the leader comments that the foreigner has incredibly soft hands for a slave. Assuring her safety, the elder woman promises that someone with that body type would never lay a hand on anyone. The young woman shows immense humility, revealing that she doesn't care about living surrounded by luxury and abundance. In her heart, the one and only true wish is that the foreigner isn't a violent monster at home. Hugging the sleeping little one, the woman accepts living hidden in a dark corner to avoid trouble. The night's calm is broken by harsh knocks on the cabin's wooden structure. Immediately, the homeowner goes into a state of shock and protectively holds the girl in her arms in desperation. The face of one of the neighbors appears in the window, demanding quick entry inside. The door opens to reveal the villager, who brings the newly purchased prisoner by the arm. Paralyzed by the huge male silhouette, the young woman just nervously agrees with the elder's orders. Pushed into the rustic environment, the MC tries to get his bearings in the absolute darkness. Cowering on the dirty floor, the woman stares at the foreigner with pure fear shining in her eyes. Juhwan observes the two of them, completely terrified, and soon connects the dots about who his future wife will be. Still huddled in the corner, the young woman feels her heart race due to the intimidating presence of that giant. Curious about her strong reaction, the MC turns his head to better analyze the situation. A flash of memory hits him as he recognizes the kind bread giver from the cage, but a confused look takes over the young man's face when he notices she can't stop trembling uncontrollably. His reflection is cut short when the villager grabs his arm, demanding action with incomprehensible words. The guide continues pushing the big guy toward the two, generating even more panic in the resident. Trying to keep his balance as he walks, Jahan ends up getting very close to his new partner. Complaining about the couple's exaggerated stiffness, the native surprisingly intercepts the MC's hand. Without the slightest ceremony, the old man forces direct contact, brusquely joining the young people's hands. Proud of his own romantic achievement, the resident steps back, praising the beautiful appearance of that forced union. Trapped in that absurdly embarrassing moment, the young man processes the immense tension filling the air. The insane promise from Santa Claus about delivering a submissive family comes back to haunt his thoughts. Admiring the woman's face, he can see the exact cuteness of a helpless little bunny in her. And the little girl clinging to her mother's skirt reflects the same adorable purity of a baby mongoose. Utterly perplexed by the cruel irony of fate, he understands that the old man's magic worked. The female pair continues to cower, expecting the worst from that giant who just arrived at the residence. Frustrated, he recalls the torture of the slave cart and concludes that the trip to another world was an unnecessary exaggeration. With his head down, an angry and dark aura begins to take over his entire body. With pure hatred in his soul, the MC vows to destroy Santa Claus if he ever finds him. Showing great irritation with life, the newcomer turns his back, leaving his new family lost in the dark. At dawn, Juwan is already in the middle of the dense forest, following two native villagers. Walking without understanding a single word they say soon starts to wear on the young man's patience. Breaking the journey's rhythm, one of the villagers turns around and extends his hand in a peaceful gesture. Confused by the unexpected approach, he accepts the interaction, believing it to be a simple, friendly agreement. The handshake is firm, but the pressure exerted by the older man increases in a very painful way. Feeling his bones crack slightly, the MC resists, believing it to be a rough local greeting. Tired of being made a fool of in this world, he scowls, deciding not to bow his head to anyone. In a merciless counterattack, the young man crushes the native's fingers, forcing a sharp scream to tear through the forest. The hunter collapses on the grass, crying from the deep pain of his injury, causing his partner to stare in astonishment. Desperate, the other man tries to appease the rivalry by bowing in front of Juwan, who understands nothing. In an attempt to fix things, the fearful native hands a wooden bow directly to the giant. Analyzing the primitive weapon, the MC assesses the guide's submissive posture and dismisses any danger. Through large and exaggerated gestures, the partner begins to instruct the foreigner on hunting tactics. The ridiculous mime simulating long ears perfectly gives away what the day's furry target will be. At that moment, Juwan realizes that his true role in the tribe will be to provide meat for the table. A very subtle noise in the foliage cuts the improvised lesson short and attracts the hunter's deadly gaze. Very excited by his luck, the villager pats the student's shoulder and points frantically at a thick bush. Oblivious to the imminent danger, a small white rabbit calmly chews its green food in its hiding spot. Demanding an immediate and accurate shot, the guide has no idea that the foreigner has never used a bow and arrow. Overcome by heavy nervousness, the novice draws the string, doubting his ability to hit from that distance. But as soon as his feet are firmly planted, the weapon's steel tip lights up with a strong, magical blue aura. In the blink of an eye, the violent shot explodes the ground, grazing the side of the poor flying rabbit. Jaws dropped, both shooter and instructor are amazed and speechless at the level of destruction from that arrow. Without missing a beat, the prey escapes in a flurry of hops, leaving the pair of humans staring at the damage done to the trees. Far from all the commotion, the young lady holds an empty basket waiting for her hunter husband's success. Surprised by the absurd destruction he just caused, the MC tries to understand the situation. He stands in silence, processing the sheer power coming from a simple wooden bow. Just then, the young man spots his young wife walking through the forest, hand in hand with the little girl. Seeing that familiar scene, his heart skips a beat. While the hunters mourn the loss of the rabbit, the woman quietly approaches. Soon after, they set up an impromptu picnic on the dirt ground to rest. The young wife and the little girl begin to eat, while Juan just watches in silence. A bowl full of hot stew is offered to the giant. Without saying anything, the young man begins to eat the meal with the two of them. But a movement beside him catches his attention, making him turn his head quickly. In silence, he pays close attention to the gentle interaction of the mother feeding her daughter. Feeling an unexpected calmness, the big guy relaxes his posture and gives a small smile. Reflecting on the word family, he remembers that it had always been a strange concept from his youth until his 30s. However, now he feels that he has finally gotten a real family. Acknowledging that it would be better if it were natural, the young man concludes that the order of things no longer matters. Looking up at the sky, he confesses the urge to take out Santa Claus for the confusion, but he quickly changes his mind. Watching the two of them on the ground, he offers a sincere thank you for the unusual gift. The next day, the routine of this new family begins to pick up as they walk along a long trail. Carrying a heavy sack on his back, the foreigner looks back wanting to know if they are keeping up. The young wife walks breathlessly and visibly exhausted while holding the little one's hand. Frustrated by the language barrier, he regrets not being able to ask if the woman needs a break. Realizing the urgency, Juan decides he needs to adapt to this world as quickly as possible. Suddenly, his steps stop firmly on the dirt ground. A childhood memory emerges, recalling old advice about never hesitating when protecting someone. The maternal figure from his past reinforces that the desire to care requires immediate action. Motivated by the memory, the big guy turns around in absolute silence. He walks with heavy steps toward the two, who back away in fear. Cowering in fear, the little girl trembles, thinking something bad is about to happen. The MC kneels in front of them and says he's going to pick them up, asking them not to be afraid. Understanding none of the language, the young wife is shocked, imagining the worst-case scenario. The woman tries to beg for mercy in a strange tongue, leaving the young man confused. The little girl begins to cry loudly, terrified by his approach. Noticing the despair generated just by his presence, the foreigner thinks it's best to be careful even with his own facial expression. Politely, he asks for permission and extends his arms toward the two of them. In a swift movement, he lifts the young wife off the ground, taking her by surprise. Taking advantage of the momentum, the big guy pulls the little one into his other arm with ease. Very calmly, he adjusts them both securely against his body. He now carries the supplies on his back and his new family in his arms without showing any effort. Surprised by the gentle act, the girl lets out a sound of admiration. Leaning on the young man's broad shoulder, the woman's eyes widen in astonishment at the situation. Telling them to hold on tight, the MC resumes his walk. Walking with ease, he finds it absurd how light the two of them are, even while carrying everything else. Focused on changing that, he promises to learn the language and master hunting soon to fill the house with meat. Looking into his partner's eyes, Juan realizes he has a lot of work ahead of him. Gradually, the young woman's tension eases and she allows herself to rest her head on his neck. Her delicate hands grip the giant's shirt quite firmly. Feeling that subtle grip, he continues on his way peacefully. The long walk through the forest finally comes to an end in a more isolated area. The guide says goodbye, bowing before a rustic cabin, while the young man thanks him for the favor. After the villager's departure, the foreigner stares at the dilapidated wooden structure. Analyzing his new home, he notices that the place seems even colder than his old rooftop room. The MC feels a chill, just imagining the suffering that awaits them in a place without heating. Pushing the old door with his free hand, he enters the residence. However, the scene inside leaves the newcomer completely confused. Now on solid ground, the young wife gets a huge shock when she sees the room. Tears begin to stream down her face, making the big guy ask why she's crying. Desperate, the woman runs into the cottage looking for something. The young man follows her movements, trying to understand the gravity of the problem. Standing in the middle of the completely empty room, he finally realizes the reason for so much panic. Juan deduces that while he was held in the village, the residents had stolen absolutely all the furniture and tools from the house. With no material to repair the walls and no weapons to fend off predators, the situation becomes extremely critical. Walking through the yard, he finds the woman collapsed on the grass, crying inconsolably. To calm the situation, the foreigner sits next to her on the dirt ground. In a friendly gesture, he raises his hand to the top of his partner's head, surprising the young woman. Gently stroking her hair, the young man tries to convey a sense of security. In a very soft tone of voice, he asks his wife not to worry about anything. With teary eyes, she tries to interpret the actions of this giant unknown man. The woman's mind raises cruel doubts, as they don't speak the same language, and he doesn't know how to hunt. The fear of not being able to survive together in this hostile environment tightens the native's heart. However, a calm and welcoming smile forms on the MC's face. Conveying total confidence, he promises to protect his new family from any danger. Even without understanding the exact words, the affectionate contact dispels the young woman's anxiety. The tears still fall, but the feeling of dread gradually fades from her eyes. Deep down, the woman wonders why she is feeling such great relief near him. For the first time in a long time, peace and hope begin to bloom once more in the heart of that rejected resident. Recalling his past, Juan thinks about how he lived alone ever since his parents passed away in his original world. Even so, the young man fought hard and endured all the difficulties to survive. With that in mind, the MC realizes that now he has no reason to falter, as he has finally gained a family. Conveying total confidence, he assures the woman that he will do whatever it takes to provide for the household. Sitting on the grass, the young wife wipes her tears while listening to her husband's comforting words. Suddenly, a sudden noise catches the couple's attention. The little girl runs desperately toward them, yelling for the big guy not to hurt the woman. In a protective impulse, the little one hugs the maternal figure tightly to try and defend her. Observing the scene, the foreigner remains silent in the face of the child's courageous act. He looks at the crying woman right in front of him, and he notices the girl in tears right beside her, admitting that this whole situation is very strange. Various thoughts invade the young man's mind, questioning who this child is and why the young woman shared food with him before. In that, he also tries to understand the reason for so much suffering and tears. Despite so many doubts, Juan firmly believes that if they try to live together, they will end up becoming a good family. Determined, the MC promises to become a good husband and a great father, ensuring that he will never let the two of them cry again. The foreigner silently vows that he will do everything to make sure they never regret this union. As the sun sets, the air around the old wooden cabin begins to cool. Already inside the empty residence, the trio sits on the floor, maintaining a certain distance. With his hand on his head, Juan laments the situation, feeling they are back at square one after getting a little closer. At least the young man is relieved to notice that they are just cautious and not terrified of his presence. Suddenly, the big guy has an idea of how to break the ice. Without hesitation, he scoots across the wooden floor, approaching the two natives. With a finger on his own chest, the foreigner introduces himself, saying his name loud and clear. Speaking the syllables slowly, he understands that they at least need to know what to call each other to live together well. Surprised by the sudden action, the young wife lets out a sigh of understanding. With his hand extended toward his partner, the husband asks to know her name. A bit hesitant, the woman finally answers shyly, revealing her name is Lizzie. After hearing the response, the MC repeats the word to commit it to memory. Excited by the progress, he compliments the woman, saying he thinks it's a very beautiful name. Right after, the giant turns his face to the frightened little girl, trying to find out what her name is. But the little one just shrinks back in silence, leaving the young man confused by the sudden change in mood. Seeing the child's sad expression, the foreigner realizes that perhaps she hasn't been named yet. From this realization, Juan adopts a thoughtful posture, trying to find a solution. With a gentle touch on the girl's head, he tells her he will choose a special name for her. Inspired by an old story from his world, the MC decides to name her Dorothy. He bases it on the brave little girl who travels to magical lands, meeting many different friends. The adoptive father's wish is for the child to find her own happiness and grow up to be adorable. In an attempt to get used to the pronunciation, the little one repeats the word while the big guy explains its affectionate meaning. Delighted with the gift, the new Dorothy shows a contagious joy on her face. Sometime later, outside the cabin, the makeshift woodcutter brings his axe down hard on a piece of a log. Hiding behind a tree, Lizzie watches the hard work, thinking this man is very strange. The native reflects that, although he is much larger than her violent former husband, the foreigner treats her with unexpected kindness. To the young wife, this mysterious giant is completely different from all the cruel people she has ever met in her life. She tries to pronounce his name quietly, noticing that even without understanding the language, the young man's voice sounds very gentle. Because of the memories of past mistreatment, the woman confesses to herself that she has never been treated with such affection. With her gaze fixed on the hard-working man's sweat, Lizzie wonders about the true reason for so much kindness. The resident concludes that this foreigner definitely does not belong in this hostile place. At that moment, Jawan notices his wife's presence watching from afar and waves excitedly, calling out to her. Surprised at being noticed, the woman focuses her gaze on her husband's incredibly dark hair and eyes. An old piece of gossip crosses the native's mind about rumors that an enemy nation managed to summon a legendary hero. The legend describes an imposing warrior possessing the exact same physical characteristics as Juwon. As the big guy calmly walks toward her, the woman continues to analyze the situation. With the sunlight hitting him head-on, she notices that his features really do resemble the figure from the legend. However, the young wife soon discards this crazy idea, since someone so important would be in a grand palace and not a miserable village. Besides, the girl is aware that this summoning story is just a baseless rumor. The woodcutter finally approaches, and the native notices that his hair color leans more toward a brown tone. Analyzing his eyes up close, she notices the same warm hue, dispelling her own doubt. With a long sigh of relief, Lizzie is happy that he is just a very large, ordinary man. But right after, the woman finds this comforting feeling strange, remembering she only met the giant a few hours ago. Understanding nothing, the young man scratches his cheek in confusion while his wife trembles slightly, turning her face away in embarrassment. Captivated by her cute reaction, Juwan adopts a friendly posture and brings his right hand to his wife's head. The woman receives the gentle touch, feeling that she is definitely not used to this kind of treatment. This is because the only reason a man's hand had touched her before was to deliver cowardly blows. Even so, the hunter continues to stroke her hair in a very respectful and delicate manner. With her eyes closed, the native enjoys the pleasant sensation and secretly wishes for it not to end so soon. Completely relaxed, Lizzie mentally hopes for her husband to continue with the affectionate caresses. Just then, the foreigner ends up leaning a bit too far, feeling his face heat up as he notices the proximity. The young wife lifts her sleepy gaze, looking at the giant with an incredibly inviting expression. Guided by the romantic mood in the forest, the two close their eyes and bring their lips closer in an irresistible attraction. However, just inches away from a kiss, the couple is caught completely by surprise. Juwan's eyes fly open in astonishment, shattering the mood immediately. In a quick leap backward, both of them abruptly pull away and freeze in pure embarrassment at the situation. In an attempt to hide his awkwardness, the young man averts his gaze and lets out a dry cough. To change the subject, the big guy quickly walks over to an empty wooden bucket lying on the grass. With a firm hand on the object's handle, he focuses on the house chores to try and forget the almost kiss that just happened. Hurrying away from there, Juwan flees with the bucket in hand, leaving Lizzie behind. The young wife is left completely embarrassed, her heart racing from the situation that just occurred. Now, in the middle of the forest, the MC walks along, thinking he's a lunatic and wondering what the woman must be thinking of him. He stops and puts a hand to his head, stressed that they got married and met on the same day without even being able to communicate. Not knowing how to act, the young man considers if the best way out would be to simply pretend none of that happened. Interrupting his own thoughts, he freezes in his tracks out of nowhere. Observing the darkness of the forest around him, the foreigner realizes he has walked too far and has no idea where he is. Just then, a sinister noise echoes through the dark trees. Deciding not to mess around, Jawan turns back to get the water quickly and return home. But a chill runs down his spine when he notices something bizarre. A gigantic black wolf with glowing red eyes appears, blocking his path. The wild beast snarls menacingly, ready to attack at any moment. Faced with that frightening monster, the young man backs away slowly, trying to stay calm. Shocked by the animal's absurd size, he finally understands the mortal danger he is facing. With no way out, the husband drops the wooden bucket on the ground and prepares for the worst. Acting quickly, Juwon grabs a thick branch from the ground to try and defend himself. Without wasting time, the wolf lunges forward, opening its immense mouth to devour him. Using all his strength, the MC puts the piece of wood in front of him to block the deadly bite. In a desperate cry, the young man seizes the opportunity and readies a direct punch at the beast. The blow lands squarely on the animal's head, with a violent impact. However, the force of the bite is so strong that the wooden branch shatters completely, leaving the foreigner irritated. Pressing the attack, the monster leaps on top of him while the young man vows he won't go down in this place, no way. Determined to survive, he continues to deliver brutal punches to push the creature away. Even while taking hits, the fierce wolf resists and counterattacks, injuring the hunter's body, who groans in pain. Crying out in agony, the MC feels his entire body burn as if it's on fire. Suddenly, confusion takes over his face as he notices a strange sensation. An explosion of flames erupts from nowhere right in the middle of the chaos. Startling the beast, the foreigner's right arm becomes completely engulfed in an intense magical fire. Faced with this absurd heat, the black wolf immediately retreats, letting out yelps of terror. Completely cornered, the monster lets out a desperate howl, trying to escape the burning flames. Taking advantage of the enemy's terror, Yuan advances and lands a direct flaming blow. Defeated, the gigantic wolf falls to the ground, smoke rising from its burnt wounds. Completely exhausted, the young man collapses on the grass, wondering what the heck just happened as he saw his own arm catch fire. Lifting his arm to check the damage, he is intrigued to find that there are no burn marks on his clothes. Sitting on the ground, it begins to sink in for the MC as he considers the possibility that he actually used magic. Memories of old stories from his world come to mind, about people who fall into other universes and gain incredible powers. Associating this with the glowing slave contract from before, he realizes he's living the perfect cliché of those stories. With his eyes fixed on his own hand, the young man decides to put this crazy theory to the test. Extending his arm with determination, he shouts the name of a classic spell to try and summon fire. Frustrated, he repeats the words several times, changing his pose around the scene, but absolutely nothing happens. Discouraged and lying on the grass, the foreigner tries other names of destructive spells with no success. Staring at the monster's carcass, he even tries reciting grand phrases, asking for strength from the spirits of fire and dragons. However, the embarrassing silence that follows makes him feel like a complete idiot. Scratching his head, Juwan knows it wasn't an illusion, because his wounds healed a bit and he dreams of mastering this power to provide for his family. His greatest desire now is to use magic to become a great hunter and provide a plentiful and happy environment for the two of them. Relaxed on the ground, he also thinks about how healing magic would be perfect to treat the two of them, since that forgotten village has no doctors. Getting up calmly, the young man stretches his arms and decides he will investigate these powers with more patience. Just then, dark memories of the past invade his mind, recalling when he lost his parents at a very young age. The tragedy was followed by abandonment, with relatives fighting and unjustly blaming him for everything bad that happened. The family's hatred was so great that they accused him of bringing misfortune to everyone who lived under the same roof. Treated like a true jinx by his own relatives, the boy suffered alone, facing this cruel burden. Back in the present, a melancholic expression takes over Juhwan's face. Pushing aside these bad thoughts, he focuses on the beast's corpse and decides to skin it right there before other predators appear. With the gigantic creature on his back, the hunter begins the journey back home, planning to finish the heavy work later. Along the way, he mentally thanks his grandfather for having seen him butcher animals in the past, as that helped him a lot in the forest. Walking under the moonlight, the MC feels a pang of longing and wishes the old man could see him now. To distract his mind, the young man refocuses on his new goal of figuring out how to train his newly discovered magical abilities. Meanwhile, inside the old cabin lit by the fireplace, the young wife focuses on preparing the food carefully. Needing help, Lizzie gently asks the nearby child for a bowl. Little Dorothy hands over the utensil excitedly and receives a cute pat on the head as thanks. Radiant with the affection, the little girl breaks into a huge smile, feeling the warmth of this new family. Bursting with energy, the child starts running from one side of the cabin to the other, having a great time. Curious about the outside, the little one leans on the wooden window to peek into the darkness of the night. Observing the entrance to the property, she lets out a murmur of confusion as she notices something moving. Suddenly, the head of a monstrous wolf appears in her field of vision, making the girl scream in pure terror. In tears, the child runs desperately away from the window, leaving Lizzie completely startled by the sudden scream. Understanding there is danger, the young wife acts on instinct and quickly grabs a kitchen knife from the table. Holding the makeshift weapon firmly, the woman runs toward the door, telling the little girl to stay far away. As soon as she reaches the entrance, the native's breath catches in her throat as she recognizes the bizarre scene outside. Carrying the immense beast on his back, Juan appears, panting from the effort as he hears his wife call his name. The foreigner throws the heavy carcass to the ground just as the woman comes out of the cabin in a total panic. Completely terrified, she runs toward her husband, believing he was attacked by the monster. Not understanding the commotion, the young man sits on the ground at the entrance, looking at the evident panic in the two of them. Stopping suddenly, the young wife realizes that the giant is safe and sound in front of her. Overcome by an overwhelming relief, the strength leaves the woman's body, and the knife slips from her hand, falling onto the grass. Worried, Lizzie quickly checks on the foreigner, but Juan assures her that everything is fine and he wasn't seriously hurt. Just then, little Dorothy also approaches worriedly, touching the hunter's leg in silence. With his wife's hands in his, the young man calms the situation, telling her he only took a bite to the arm. EMC reinforces that there is no reason to panic and that he is truly safe. Relieved by the news, the woman surprises the foreigner with a sudden tight hug. He tries to deduce if those repeated words mean some kind of relief that he is alive. Just below, the little girl does the same thing, hugging the hunter's leg while sobbing. The realization that the child is crying for the same reason makes the young man vow not to leave them like this again. The next day, the morning dawns peacefully around the wooden cabin. Already awake, Juan prepares the monster's carcass on a table outside. With precise cuts from a knife, he separates the most important parts of the animal. The sweat on his forehead shows that the job is much more time-consuming than it seemed in his memories with his grandfather. Exhausted, he already thinks about trying different methods on the next hunt to make the work easier. Finally, the hunter puts the finishing touches on the piece of meat. At that exact moment, Lizzie comes out of the house carrying a wooden bucket. Noticing her approach, the husband calls the young wife by her name. She quickens her pace toward him, holding the container. As soon as she places the object on the ground, the woman indicates that he should put the meat inside. The foreigner quickly gets the message and realizes the bucket is for storing the food. Thoughtfully, the MC tries to remember how to say thank you in this world's language. With a bit of hesitation, he points to the woman and utters a clumsy thank you. The unexpected gesture leaves the native completely enchanted. Faced with that reaction, the young man immediately worries, thinking he said something dumb in the other language. But to his relief, the woman breaks into a genuine smile and repeats the same word. Excited, she takes a step forward, getting closer to her husband. Without taking her eyes off the young man, she confirms that he got the pronunciation right. Back to work, the hunter responds politely while storing the food. In silence, he reflects that he had never received a simple thank you from his own relatives in the past. The young wife is surprised by his excessive gratitude for just helping with the bucket. In a moment of reflection, the woman touches her lips, remembering their first awkward moment of intimacy. The simple memory makes the woman's face turn completely red with embarrassment. With her eyes fixed on her husband's back, she feels a mixture of shyness and curiosity. The native starts to wonder if the foreigner has ever had this kind of intimacy with other women before her. This simple doubt is enough to make the young woman's heart ache completely. In a sudden impulse, the wife runs toward him as soon as he puts the load on the table. Without hesitation, she tries to help with the chore, finding it strange that he is doing domestic work. As she picks up the pieces of meat, the woman doesn't understand why he is taking on all the heavy tasks. In her haste to help, the housewife ends up accidentally bumping into the hunter. The sudden contact makes nervousness take over the woman instantly. Expecting the worst, she squeezes her eyes shut. The MC leans his face down, getting very close to her forehead. With a gentle movement, he gives his wife a tender kiss on the forehead. A quick step back accompanies the woman's mental scolding for having created false expectations. Not understanding the abrupt reaction, the young man just watches the woman look away, completely embarrassed. In a silent panic, she is dying of embarrassment, imagining that she made her intention obvious. To break the mood, Juhwan calmly approaches again. Determined not to be embarrassed again, the young woman decides to keep her eyes wide open this time. However, the foreigner surprises her and steals a kiss right from the woman's lips. After the touch, he gives a gentle look as the native processes what just happened. With the bucket back in his hands, the hunter notices the little girl's presence nearby. Hiding in the corner of the door, the child watches everything in silence. The embarrassment of having an audience makes Lizzie run inside the house without looking back. With the wood in hand, the husband follows the dirt path, accompanied by the little one. The child walks right behind, trying to keep up with the man's long strides. Just then, the young man turns back, flashing a friendly smile to thank her. The girl's silence makes him wonder if the mistake was not using her name. Exactly halfway, the foreigner rests the weight on the ground and calls the little one by her proper name. Radiant with the recognition, the little girl runs to help push the object with all her might. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, the wife strokes the dark fur of the slain beast. Directly from the floor, the MC finds it strange that she is drying the stinky hide in the living room. Suddenly, the young man finally understands the reason for that unusual behavior. The scene makes him realize that the monster's pelt is incredibly valuable to them. Excited, little Dorothy helps to clean the animal's thick hide. The soft texture fascinates the little girl, who rests her head on the fur, enjoying the comfort. This cute moment draws sincere laughter from the young wife. The husband smiles with satisfaction, seeing that he managed to provide a moment of joy for his new family. The day passes peacefully at the quiet, isolated property near the forest. In the preparation of supplies, the pieces of meat are seasoned for preservation. Focused on the details, Juwan analyzes the process to learn how to store food in the future. The woman's happiness as she stores the animal's fat relieves him for not having discarded that part of the hunt. With a new goal in mind, he feels the pressure of needing to understand the basics of local survival. This valuable resource makes the hunter plan to master the trade system quickly to ensure their livelihood. Without wasting time, the young man gets up, determined to get back to heavy work instead of just resting. But before he can leave, the young wife runs to block the doorway. Completely confused by the interruption, the husband asks if she wants him to stay on the floor. Juhwan says that he has rested enough and is not feeling any pain in his wound. Gently touching his wife's shoulder, he asks her not to worry, as he won't overdo it with physical exertion. The young woman just watches in silence as her husband walks away to the cabin's room. Now in the forest, the MC assesses the trees and concludes that their size is perfect for practicing woodcutting. Holding the axe firmly, the young man trusts his own strength for the job, even without knowing which of them is the best type of wood. Without wasting time, the hunter lifts the heavy tool, preparing his first strike on the tree. With an incredibly fast movement, the blade descends, tearing through the air toward the wide trunk. The violent impact generates a huge boom that makes the foreigner recoil, startled by the result. Shocked by his own exaggerated strength, he is left completely speechless at the damage caused. Meanwhile, tranquility reigns supreme outside the quiet wooden cabin. Suddenly opening the door, Juwan returns carrying an absurd amount of firewood stacked on his back. The unusual scene leaves the woman and child completely impressed by the man's strength. The woman follows her husband's steps as he enters the residence with the extremely heavy load. As soon as the young man sits on the floor, exhausted, the native approaches, not quite understanding what is happening. Worried, the young wife begins to massage his arm, even with the foreigner assuring her that everything is fine. Charmed by the caring gesture, Juwan thanks the woman for her attention very gently. Just then, little Dorothy comes running super excitedly across the wooden floor of the house. The little girl dunks her hand into the water basin, and with her hands soaked, the child runs back, splashing drops along the way, and then she soaks the MC. Completely drenched, the young man is left bewildered by that sudden aquatic assault. The wife panics, trying to apologize for the little one's unexpected mess. But the little girl just looks at the foreigner with a very innocent gaze, expecting some praise. Understanding the good intention behind the action, the MC gives her a cute pat on the head and thanks her for her help. Excited by the recognition, the little one runs to get more water, making the adults desperately beg her to stop. Later, while drying off by the fireplace with the woman's help, Juan reflects that all of this really seems like a dream. He never imagined he would have such a happy life, and promises himself that he will protect the smiles of these two forever. The day soon comes to an end, and the darkness of night falls heavily over the isolated property on the mountain. The smoke rising steadily from the chimney indicates that the fireplace is already lit to ward off the nightly chill. Gathered around the bountiful table, the new family enjoys a beautiful, hot dinner together. Tired after the busy day, the child ends up falling asleep right there and receives an affectionate head scratch from the young man. The girl sleeps deeply at the table, exuding a tranquility that is completely contagious to everyone. Observing the cute scene, the young wife lets out a discreet giggle, charmed by the little one's way. Very carefully, the foreigner picks up the light child in his arms to take her to the comfortable bed. While her husband takes care of the girl, Lizzie begins to collect the dirty bowls to tidy up the kitchen. The MC walks with slow steps across the room until he reaches the bedding near the lit fireplace. Moving smoothly, he lays little Dorothy on the blankets without waking her from her deep sleep. Outside, darkness dominates the environment, accompanied only by the crickets of the forest. Focused on domestic chores, the housewife finishes washing the dinner dishes in the basin of hot water. Just then, her husband quietly approaches from behind and grabs a clean cloth to help dry the wet plates. During the shared task, the foreigner's large hand ends up touching hers very delicately. The sudden contact makes the native's heart race as she looks at the young man, dying of shyness. Noticing the woman's sudden tension, Juan is a little confused by her unexpected silence. The atmosphere between the couple becomes increasingly intimate in the small lit space of the kitchen. Closing the small distance between them, the hunter gently pulls her closer in a warm embrace. With the night advancing quickly, the hunter begins to take off his leather vest to prepare for sleep. Observing his body, the wife tries to swallow her embarrassment, remembering that helping her husband undress is the natural role of a married woman. Suddenly mustering up courage, she extends her trembling arms and tries to pull off the sleeves of his shirt. The clumsy initiative takes the MC by surprise as the woman struggles with the thick fabric of the shirt. Understanding her enormous effort, he just gives a comforting smile and lets her lead the situation at her own pace. However, shyness wins the battle, and the native hides her face, completely overcome by extreme embarrassment. Very calmly, the young man holds the woman's hand to reassure her and show that everything is okay. Exchanging glances full of intense affection, he makes it clear that there is no reason for her to feel so much pressure there. Leaning close to his wife's ear, the foreigner softly whispers that it's past time for them to rest. Without any warning, he picks the woman up in his arms and carries her directly to the warmest area of the cabin. With extreme gentleness in his arms, the husband lays the young woman down on the soft blankets near the fire. Lying face to face under the dim light of a lamp, the couple settles in, sharing the same blanket in complete silence. Moved by a sincere feeling, Juan strokes the woman's long, loose hair with great tenderness. This simple touch is more than enough to draw a shy and loving smile from her face. Taking advantage of the strong proximity between them, the MC places a gentle kiss on the top of his wife's head. Embracing the woman's fragile body, he feels her calm breathing and realizes just how soft she really is. Looking at the little one and his wife sleeping, the young man still finds it hard to believe that he finally has a family to protect with his own life. In a nostalgic thought, he pleads for Santa Claus not to take this happiness away from him and to allow them all to live in peace until the end of their days. An imposing mansion perfectly illustrates the reflection that wealthy nobles would never understand the pure simplicity of that life. In that cruel medieval world, all peasant children grow up crowded together, sharing the same single room with their parents. In her lonely past, the young wife was full of doubts about what married couples actually did together in the dead of night. The only rotten example the woman had was the shadow of her cowardly father, who caused absolute terror with his violent screams. In her traumatic childhood, she would cower desperately under the covers, listening to her own mother's constant and painful cries until dawn. All this sickly past transformed the native's existence into a true nightmare dominated by fear of everything and everyone, and she fears ending up repeating her mother's same depressing story. Suddenly, the young woman's beautiful eyes begin to open slowly, chasing the nightmares away. The crackling and comforting sound of the wood burning in the fireplace awakens the woman from her restorative rest. Completely lost in time, she realizes she is in the spacious bed, even though she is absolutely certain she fell asleep on the hard floor. Surprised by the extreme care, the woman notices that the kind foreigner had offered his own strong arm to serve as a soft pillow for her. Embraced by the comforting warmth of that new, united family, the native finally finds the peace she had sought her entire life. Watching her husband sleep peacefully, Lizzie feels an enormous relief, realizing that a couple's nights didn't have to be frightening. She reflects on how her whole world has been changing for the better since she met this man. Just then, the foreigner awakens slightly, taking the native by surprise. Still sleepy, Juan pulls his wife and little Dorothy closer in a cozy hug. The young woman's heart pounds with the sudden contact, feeling like it will explode with so much emotion. With her chest overflowing with joy, she just hopes this moment will last forever. The morning sun floods the rustic cabin, fully awakening the hunter. Getting up slowly, the young man gets out of bed carefully so as not to wake the little girl who is still sleeping heavily. Before leaving, he gently strokes the child's head. Already on her feet, Lizzie enters the room carrying a wooden bucket. Quickly, the MC takes the container's handle to help with the weight, slightly startling the woman. He holds the heavy load without any difficulty, showing a friendly smile to the native. Without wasting time, the foreigner pours all the water directly into the cauldron over the fire. Turning his head, the husband says something in his native language that the woman cannot understand. Understanding none of those words, the young wife just stares at him, a little confused. Juan asks if she slept well, but soon notices that the woman's face is completely red. The woman nods in agreement, making the hunter wonder if the reason for her embarrassment was how he had addressed her. He deduces that the term of endearment was the main culprit for all this cute embarrassment. Trying to resolve this, the young man asks what he should call her, suggesting just using her name. Dying of shyness, she asks in a trembling voice to continue being called darling, drawing a smile from the MC. Fulfilling her request, he repeats the word gently, causing the native to hide her embarrassed face with her hands. Completely flustered, the housewife turns her back, trying to hide her extreme nervousness. Finding her reaction adorable, Juan feels an immense urge to tease her even more. Giving a light touch on his wife's shoulder, he asks the woman to look at him. At that exact moment, little Dorothy wakes up with a startled jump in bed. Still half asleep and drooling with desire, the little girl murmurs that she wants to eat meat. Driven by hunger, the child clumsily gets out from under the blankets. The girl runs super excitedly toward the couple, grabbing their attention. However, she rushes right past the adults at an absurd pace without even looking back. The little one's eyes shine with excitement as she comes face to face with a huge piece of hanging meat. The couple can't help but burst out laughing, seeing the girl hug the barrel, trying to reach the food at all costs. Watching the little girl's excitement, the foreigner is enchanted by the scene. Her hunger is so great that the child hangs from the wooden edge, swinging her little legs non-stop. Determined to keep the pantry full, the hunter promises to work very hard on today's hunt. Walking confidently through the dense woods, the MC feels ready to face even another giant wolf. After all, this time he brought his lumberjack's axe, considering it a much more reliable weapon for the job. The young man's firm steps crush the damp grass of the silent forest. Suddenly, the foreigner stops in the middle of the path, sensing something strange in the air. Turning his body quickly, he feels a crushing pressure completely dominating the environment. Gripping the axe handle tightly, Juan reports a horrible suffocating sensation despite being in an open place. Tense with the imminent danger, he mentally prepares to face any terrible monster that might emerge from the shadows. Just then, the sound of heavy footsteps echoes through the dark mist, revealing a mysterious figure. Instead of a wild beast, the MC is surprised to see that it is a person. The hooded stranger walks slowly toward the hunter without showing any apparent hostility. The newcomer's face finally takes shape under the hood, revealing an elderly man with a thin beard. Very suspicious of that suffocating presence, Juan wonders who this sinister man wandering around could be.